The ammunition depot hummed with the mechanical precision of a military operation in full swing. Forklifts maneuvered between towering stacks of ordnance, while technicians in desert camouflage moved with practiced efficiency. Apache helicopters sat in perfect formation across the tarmac, their rotors folded like sleeping birds of prey awaiting resurrection. The morning sun cast long shadows across forward operating base Kestrel, somewhere in the unforgiving expanse of the Syrian desert, where the coalition forces had established their most forward position against an increasingly aggressive enemy. Chief Warrant Officer Valentina Ghost Reyes worked methodically, her weathered hands guiding Hydra 70 rockets into the weapons pylons of an AH-64D Apache longbow. Each movement was deliberate, born from 15 years of muscle memory that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the early hour, the desert heat already beginning its daily assault. Her flight suit bore the telltale signs of countless missions: faded patches, worn fabric at the knees, and the distinctive oil stains that marked a pilot who understood her aircraft intimately. Other pilots and ground crew moved around her with casual indifference. To them, she was just another warrant officer pulling maintenance duty, nothing remarkable about the compact woman with prematurely gray temples and calloused hands. They exchanged jokes about weekend plans and complained about the mess hall coffee, their voices creating a familiar backdrop of military camaraderie that somehow excluded her entirely. But as Reyes secured the final rocket and ran her inspection checklist, something caught the attention of Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne, the battalion commander making his routine morning rounds. He stopped mid-stride, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, eyes fixed on something most others had missed entirely. There, barely visible beneath years of wear and desert dust, was a small patch sewn into the upper left corner of Rey's flight suit, a ghostly gray silhouette of an aircraft that hadn't flown combat missions in over 2 decades. Thorne's face went ashen as recognition dawned. He knew that Insignia, had studied it in military history courses and seen it displayed in the halls of the Air Force Academy. It was the badge of the 415th Night Stalkers, an elite squadron that had been dissolved after a classified mission went catastrophically wrong in the mountains of Afghanistan. The survivors had been scattered across different units, their service records partially redacted, their stories buried beneath layers of operational security classifications. The commander's hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, his mind racing through classified briefings and half-remembered intelligence reports. If this woman had served with the Night Stalkers, if she was who he thought she might be, then everything he thought he knew about his newest pilot was about to change dramatically. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharper shadows across the base, as if the desert itself sensed that something significant was about to unfold. In the distance, radio chatter crackled with routine communications, but beneath the surface of this ordinary day, the threads of an extraordinary story were beginning to weave themselves together. Thorne took a deep breath and approached the woman who might hold the key to his most pressing tactical problems. "Chief Warrant Officer Reyes," he called out, his voice carrying an authority that made nearby personnel straighten reflexively. "I need to speak with you immediately." Reyes looked up from her checklist, her dark eyes meeting the commander's gaze with a steadiness that betrayed no surprise, no fear, only the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse than an unexpected conversation with a superior officer. She set down her tools with deliberate care and walked toward him, her movement fluid despite the heavy flight boots and gear-laden vest. "Yes, sir," she replied simply, her voice carrying the hint of an accent that spoke of Texas border towns and childhood summers spent in her grandfather's aircraft hangar. Thorne studied her face, searching for confirmation of his suspicions. The woman before him appeared unremarkable at first glance: medium height, athletic build, the kind of weathered features that came from years of desert sun and high-altitude flying. But her eyes told a different story. They held depths that spoke of missions flown in absolute darkness, of split-second decisions made under impossible circumstances, of teammates lost, and victories earned through skill and determination rather than luck. "That patch on your uniform," Thorne began carefully, gesturing toward the faded insignia. "The 415th Night Stalkers. I thought that unit was disbanded years ago." A shadow passed across Ray's face, so brief that most observers would have missed it entirely. But Thorne caught it, the momentary tightening around her eyes that suggested memories she would prefer to leave buried in classified files and sleepless nights. "It was, sir," she answered, her tone neutral but not quite indifferent. "Long time ago." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and carefully guarded secrets. Around them, the normal operations of the forward base continued. Mechanics worked on vehicles, communications personnel monitored radio traffic, and other pilots prepared for routine patrol missions. But in this small pocket of morning sunlight, two people stood surrounded by the weight of classified history and operational necessity. Thorne made a decision that would reshape everything about their current tactical situation. He had been struggling with intelligence reports suggesting enemy forces were using previously unknown smuggling routes through mountainous terrain that conventional aircraft couldn't effectively patrol. His current pilot roster, while competent, lacked the specialized skills needed for the kind of precision flying those missions would require. "Walk with me, Chief," he said, turning toward the operations center. "We need to have a conversation about your previous assignments." As they moved across the dusty compound, other personnel watched with varying degrees of curiosity. Some recognized the significance of a battalion commander personally escorting a warrant officer. Others simply noted it as another example of the unpredictable nature of military life in a forward operating environment. Reyes walked beside Thorne with measured steps, her expression revealing nothing of whatever thoughts occupied her mind. She had learned long ago that survival in the military required the ability to compartmentalize, to separate past experiences from present responsibilities, to function effectively regardless of what secrets might be stirring in the shadows of command decisions. The operations center buzzed with controlled activity as they entered. Intelligence analysts studied satellite imagery on multiple screens, while communications specialists coordinated with higher headquarters and adjacent units. Maps covered every available wall surface, marked with colored pins and overlays that told the story of an ongoing conflict in the visual language of military operations. Thorne led her to a small conference room adjacent to the main operations floor, closing the door behind them and activating a white noise generator that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. The room was sparse: a single table, 4 chairs, and a secure communications terminal that connected directly to classified networks. "I'm going to ask you some questions," Thorne began, settling into a chair across from her. "Some of them will touch on classified material. I have the appropriate clearances, and the tactical situation requires that I understand exactly what capabilities you bring to this unit." Reyes nodded once, her posture relaxed but attentive. She had been through similar conversations before, understood the delicate balance between operational security and mission effectiveness that drove such discussions. "The 415th Night Stalkers," Thorne continued. "They specialized in deep penetration reconnaissance missions in mountainous terrain, extremely hazardous flying conditions, minimal support, high tactical value targets. The kind of missions that required pilots with exceptional skills and nerves of steel." "That's correct, sir," Reyes replied, offering no additional information beyond confirmation of publicly available facts. Thorne leaned forward slightly. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. We've been tracking enemy movement patterns that suggest they're using mountain passes we previously thought were impassable. narrow valleys, extreme weather conditions, terrain that would challenge even our most experienced pilots. The implications hung in the air between them. Both understood that conventional patrol missions flown by standard pilots in predictable patterns would be ineffective against an enemy smart enough to exploit the most challenging geographical features of the region. "I need someone who can fly missions in conditions where other pilots would crash," Thorne stated bluntly. "Someone with the kind of experience that comes from operating in environments where failure means death and success means completing objectives that officially never happened." Reyes studied the commander's face, evaluating not just his words but the subtle indicators of stress and determination that marked a leader facing a tactical problem with potentially serious consequences. She had served under enough commanders to recognize the signs of someone wrestling with difficult decisions and limited options. "What exactly are you asking me to do, sir?" she responded, her tone carefully neutral. The question carried layers of meaning beyond its surface simplicity. Both knew they were discussing the possibility of missions that would push the boundaries of acceptable risk, operations that would require skills honed in circumstances that had ended careers and cost lives. Thorne pulled out a classified folder and opened it to reveal satellite imagery that showed mountainous terrain marked with red overlays indicating suspected enemy activity. The photographs depicted valleys so narrow they appeared as mere scratches in the rock, passes that seemed to defy the laws of physics regarding what constituted flyable airspace. "I'm asking if you're willing to take on missions that will require every skill you learned with the Night Stalkers," he said quietly. "Flying that will test limits you probably hoped you'd never have to test again." The room fell silent except for the hum of the white noise generator and the distant sounds of base operations filtering through the walls. Reyes looked at the satellite images, her trained eye automatically calculating approach angles, potential hazards, and the margin for error that would separate mission success from catastrophic failure. She thought about the 15 years that had passed since her last mission with the Night Stalkers, about the skills that had been dormant but never forgotten, about the teammates who hadn't made it home from those final classified operations. The memories carried weight, not just of personal loss, but of capabilities that had been earned through experiences most pilots would never face. "I'll need to see more detailed terrain analysis," she said finally. "Weather patterns, enemy capabilities, support assets available, and I'll need to know what happened to the pilots who have already attempted these routes." Thorne's expression grew grim. 2 aircraft have been lost in the past month attempting reconnaissance of these areas. Both were experienced pilots flying state-of-the-art aircraft with full support packages. The implications were clear. Whatever enemy capabilities they were facing in those mountain passes had proven effective against conventional approaches. Success would require something different: pilot skills that went beyond standard training, tactics that had been developed under the most extreme operational conditions imaginable. Reyes nodded slowly, understanding the full scope of what was being asked of her. She was being invited back into the world she had left behind when the Night Stalkers disbanded, a realm of flying that existed at the intersection of exceptional skill and calculated risk-taking. "When do we start?" she asked. The decision marked a turning point, not just for the tactical situation at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, but for Valentina Reyes herself. After years of routine maintenance duties and standard patrol flights, she was being called upon to resurrect capabilities that had been forged in the crucible of the most demanding military operations imaginable. As Thorne outlined preliminary mission parameters, both officers understood they were embarking on something that would test not only technical skills and tactical knowledge, but the kind of courage that could only be sustained by absolute commitment to mission success, regardless of personal cost. Outside the conference room, the normal rhythm of base operations continued, unaware that plans were being set in motion that would soon challenge every assumption about what was possible in the unforgiving terrain that surrounded their forward position. The desert sun climbed toward its daily zenith, and in the distance, mountains waited with secrets that would soon demand answers from the most skilled pilot available to provide them. Ray studied the satellite imagery one final time before the briefing concluded, her mind already beginning the complex calculations that would be required to survive what was coming next. She had accepted the mission, but both she and Thorne understood that acceptance was only the first step in a process that would ultimately test everything she had learned about flying, fighting, and surviving in the most demanding operational environment on Earth. The conference room door opened, and they returned to the bustling operations center where normal military activities continued around them. But for Valentina Ghost, Reyes, nothing would be normal again. She had been called back to the kind of flying that had earned her the call sign that now seemed prophetically appropriate, missions where pilots appeared and disappeared like spirits in the night, leaving behind only the results of objectives accomplished against impossible odds. As the briefing materials were secured in classified storage and mission planning began in earnest, the morning sun reached its full strength, casting sharp shadows across the desert landscape that would soon witness the return of skills that most believed had been buried forever with the dissolution of the 415th Night Stalkers. The first phase of mission preparation began immediately. Reyes found herself assigned to a specialized Apache longbow that had been modified for extended-range operations, equipped with additional fuel capacity and enhanced navigation systems designed for precision flying in mountainous terrain. The aircraft represented the cutting edge of military aviation technology, but success would ultimately depend on the capabilities of the pilot rather than the sophistication of the machine. Ground crew personnel worked with unusual intensity preparing the helicopter, their movements reflecting the heightened importance of the mission, even though specific operational details remained classified above their security clearance levels. They understood that something significant was developing, that their role in ensuring aircraft readiness carried implications beyond routine maintenance procedures. Reyes conducted her pre-flight inspections with methodical thoroughness, her hands moving over control surfaces and weapons systems with the practiced efficiency of someone whose life had often depended on mechanical reliability under extreme conditions. Every component was scrutinized, every system tested and retested, until she was satisfied that the aircraft would perform flawlessly when performance margins disappeared entirely. Intelligence analysts provided updated weather forecasts and terrain analysis, their reports painting a picture of operational conditions that would challenge even the most sophisticated aircraft and experienced pilots. Wind patterns in the mountain passes were unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. Visibility could change from perfect to zero in moments due to sudden weather systems that materialized without warning in the high-altitude environment. The enemy threat analysis revealed sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems, positioned at strategic locations throughout the target area, weapons platforms capable of engaging aircraft at ranges that would make traditional evasion techniques ineffective. Success would require flying profiles that maximize terrain masking, while maintaining the ability to accomplish reconnaissance objectives under conditions where detection would likely prove fatal. As mission preparation continued throughout the day, other personnel at the forward base began to notice subtle changes in operational tempo and security procedures that suggested something unusual was developing. Conversations became more guarded, classified briefings occurred more frequently, and there was an increased presence of communications specialists monitoring intelligence networks for any developments that might affect operational planning. Reyes spent the afternoon studying topographical maps and satellite imagery with an intensity that impressed even veteran intelligence officers. She traced potential flight paths with her finger, calculating approach angles and identifying landmarks that could provide navigation references in an environment where GPS systems might be jammed or unreliable. Her questions demonstrated a level of tactical knowledge that went far beyond standard pilot training, revealing expertise earned through experiences that remained classified but clearly relevant to current operational requirements. Evening brought final mission briefings and equipment checks as the tactical situation demanded immediate action based on intelligence reports indicating increased enemy activity in the target area. Time constraints meant that normal preparation periods had to be compressed, requiring rapid decision-making based on incomplete information and best available intelligence estimates. The mission briefing room filled with personnel whose security clearances allowed them access to operational details that would remain secret from the majority of base personnel. Maps covered the walls showing planned flight routes marked with colored lines that traced paths through terrain features so challenging they appeared almost theoretical on paper. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne addressed the assembled team with the gravity appropriate to operations where success would provide critical intelligence, while failure could result in loss of aircraft and personnel in terrain where recovery might prove impossible. His words carried the weight of command responsibility and the understanding that he was authorizing missions at the extreme edge of acceptable risk. The intelligence we gather from these reconnaissance flights will directly impact the safety of coalition forces throughout this operational area, Thorne explained. Enemy forces are using routes we previously believed were impassable, and their activities suggest preparation for operations that could threaten our forward positions and supply lines. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to strategic considerations affecting the broader conflict. Information gathered during these missions would influence decisions about troop deployments, resource allocation, and operational planning at the highest levels of military command. Reyes listened to the briefing with the focused attention of someone who understood that survival depended on absorbing every detail that might prove relevant when split-second decisions determined mission outcome. Her questions during the briefing process demonstrated tactical knowledge that impressed other attendees and confirmed Thorne's assessment of her capabilities. Weather conditions for the planned mission window appeared marginal but acceptable, with cloud cover that would provide concealment during certain phases of flight, while potentially creating visibility challenges during others. Wind patterns showed the typical unpredictability of mountain flying conditions, requiring constant adjustment and precise aircraft control to maintain safe flight parameters. As final preparations concluded and mission launch approached, the atmosphere throughout the operations center reflected the tension inherent in high-risk operations, where success demanded flawless execution under conditions that allowed no margin for error. Personnel moved with the focused efficiency that characterized military units preparing for operations where lives would depend on the competence and dedication of every individual involved. Reyes completed her final equipment checks and signed the appropriate documentation acknowledging her understanding of mission parameters and acceptance of the risks involved. The signatures represented more than administrative requirements. They were formal acceptance of responsibilities that extended beyond personal survival to accomplishment of objectives critical to the safety of other military personnel. The hangar fell quiet as mission launch time approached, filled with the kind of silence that precedes operations, where words become inadequate to express the complexity of emotions and responsibilities involved. Ground crew personnel completed final aircraft preparations, while communications specialists verified connectivity with higher headquarters and support elements that would monitor mission progress from secure facilities. Reyes approached her aircraft with measured steps, each movement reflecting the mental transition from preparation to execution that every combat pilot learned to navigate successfully. The Apache longbow sat ready in the harsh illumination of hangar lighting, its weapons systems armed and navigation equipment programmed with coordinates that represented more than geographic locations. They marked waypoints along a route that would test skills earned through experiences that had shaped the pilot now preparing to fly into terrain where others had already failed. The rotor blades began their rotation, creating the distinctive sound signature that marked the beginning of missions where success would be measured not just in intelligence gathered, but in safe return of aircraft and personnel under conditions that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in military aviation. As engine temperatures stabilized and systems checks confirmed aircraft readiness, the moment arrived when theoretical planning would transform into operational reality. Ground control cleared the aircraft for departure, and Rays lifted the Apache into the desert night sky, beginning a flight that would ultimately test everything she had learned about precision flying under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The lights of forward operating base Kestrel fell away below as the helicopter disappeared into darkness, carrying with it the hopes and concerns of everyone who understood the importance of the mission and the risks involved in its accomplishment. Radio communications maintained contact with base operations as the aircraft proceeded toward mountainous terrain where previous flights had encountered difficulties that resulted in lost aircraft and personnel. The voice traffic remained professional and concise, but underlying tension was evident in the careful precision of words chosen to convey essential information while maintaining operational security. Navigation systems guided the helicopter through the initial phases of flight over familiar terrain, but as mountain ridges appeared ahead, the mission entered the phase where exceptional pilot skills would determine whether objectives could be accomplished successfully. Satellite imagery and topographical maps provided planning references, but actual flying conditions would require constant adjustment based on real-time assessment of wind patterns, visibility, and terrain features that appeared different at night than they had during daylight planning sessions. The Apache approached the first mountain pass marked on mission charts as a critical navigation waypoint, and Rays began the delicate process of threading the aircraft through terrain features that allowed minimal margin for navigation error. Rotor wash from the helicopter's passage echoed off rock walls that rose on both sides of flight paths, so narrow they challenged the aircraft's maneuverability under ideal conditions. Visibility conditions fluctuated as weather patterns created pockets of clear air alternating with areas where clouds and precipitation reduced visual references to distances measured in feet rather than miles. Each transition required immediate adjustment of flight parameters and navigation techniques, demanding the kind of intuitive aircraft control that could only be maintained by pilots with extensive experience flying in similar conditions. Enemy threat indicators remained minimal during initial phases of the mission, but intelligence briefings had warned that sophisticated air defense systems could be activated without warning in response to detected aircraft operations. The tactical situation required maintaining flight profiles that maximized terrain masking while allowing completion of reconnaissance objectives, a balance that demanded precise knowledge of both aircraft capabilities and terrain features. Radio communications with base operations continued at scheduled intervals, providing updates on mission progress and confirming that support elements remained available if circumstances required emergency assistance. However, both pilot and ground personnel understood that the remote location and challenging terrain would make rescue operations extremely difficult if mechanical problems or enemy action resulted in aircraft loss in the mountainous environment. As the mission progressed deeper into mountainous terrain, Rays demonstrated the exceptional flying skills that had earned her selection for operations that pushed the boundaries of standard helicopter capabilities. Her control inputs were smooth and precise, maintaining aircraft stability in wind conditions that would have challenged less experienced pilots while navigating through terrain features that required split-second decision-making based on visual references that changed constantly. The Apache sensors detected heat signatures consistent with enemy vehicle movement, in locations that confirmed intelligence reports about previously unknown infiltration routes through mountain passes. The information represented exactly the kind of tactical intelligence that justified the risks involved in conducting reconnaissance missions in such challenging operational environments. Photographic evidence and electronic intelligence gathered during the mission provided confirmation of enemy capabilities and activities that would influence operational planning at multiple command levels. The success of the reconnaissance mission validated the decision to utilize pilot skills that had been developed through the most demanding training and operational experiences available in military aviation. As mission objectives were accomplished, and the aircraft began its return flight toward forward operating base Kestrel, both pilot and ground personnel understood that exceptional capabilities had been demonstrated under conditions that had previously resulted in mission failure and aircraft loss. The successful completion of reconnaissance objectives in terrain that had challenged other pilots confirmed that the decision to utilize Ray's specialized skills had been tactically sound. The return flight proceeded without incident, and the Apache touched down at base operations as dawn broke over the desert landscape surrounding the forward position. Ground crew personnel immediately began post-flight inspections, while intelligence specialists prepared to analyze the information gathered during the mission. Mission debriefing sessions would provide detailed analysis of flight conditions, enemy capabilities, and tactical intelligence that would influence future operations throughout the region. The successful completion of reconnaissance objectives under conditions that had previously proven impossible marked a significant tactical accomplishment that would have strategic implications for ongoing military operations. As Rays completed post-flight procedures and secured classified materials gathered during the mission, the transformation in perception among other personnel was already becoming evident. The pilot who had been conducting routine maintenance duties just days earlier had demonstrated capabilities that placed her among the most skilled military aviators operating in the region. The morning sun climbed higher over forward operating base Kestrel, illuminating a facility where tactical capabilities had been enhanced through the successful completion of missions that had previously been considered beyond the reach of available resources. Intelligence gathered during the reconnaissance flight would provide operational advantages that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne reviewed preliminary mission reports with satisfaction tempered by understanding that successful completion of one reconnaissance flight represented only the beginning of operational requirements that would continue to challenge available capabilities. Additional missions would be required to gather intelligence needed for comprehensive understanding of enemy activities in mountainous terrain that remained largely unmapped by previous reconnaissance efforts. The success of the initial reconnaissance mission established the foundation for expanded operations that would ultimately provide tactical advantages throughout the region, while demonstrating that exceptional pilot skills remained available to accomplish objectives that pushed the boundaries of standard operational capabilities. As mission planning began for subsequent flights, everyone involved understood that they were participating in operations that would influence the broader strategic situation in ways that extended far beyond the immediate reconnaissance objectives. Personnel throughout the forward base became aware that significant tactical capabilities had been demonstrated, even though specific mission details remained classified above their security clearance levels. The successful completion of operations that had previously resulted in aircraft loss created renewed confidence in the ability to gather intelligence needed for effective operational planning in challenging terrain that had limited previous reconnaissance efforts. As the morning progressed and routine base operations resumed, the helicopter that had disappeared into mountain darkness hours earlier sat in its designated parking area, showing minimal signs of the challenging mission that had tested aircraft and pilot capabilities to their maximum extent. Only those personnel directly involved in mission planning and execution fully understood the significance of what had been accomplished during the night hours when most base personnel slept safely in their quarters. The classified nature of reconnaissance operations meant that the majority of personnel would never learn specific details about missions that had provided critical intelligence, while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded previous estimates of what could be accomplished under extreme operational conditions. Success would be measured in operational advantages that influenced tactical planning without public recognition of the exceptional skills and courage required for mission accomplishment. Reyes returned to routine duties with the same professional demeanor she had maintained throughout her assignment to Forward Operating Base Kestrel, but other personnel began to notice subtle changes in how she was regarded by command personnel and intelligence specialists who understood the significance of her contributions to operational effectiveness. The successful reconnaissance mission marked the beginning of a new phase in tactical operations at the forward base, where previously unavailable capabilities would allow gathering of intelligence that had been beyond reach of standard reconnaissance assets. Future missions would build upon the foundation established by demonstrating that exceptional pilot skills remained available to accomplish objectives that demanded the highest levels of professional competence and personal courage. As classified mission reports were transmitted to higher headquarters and intelligence analysts began processing information gathered during the reconnaissance flight, the tactical situation throughout the region began shifting in ways that reflected the enhanced capabilities now available for operations in terrain that had previously limited military effectiveness. The desert sun reached its daily zenith over Forward Operating Base Kestrel, marking another day in ongoing military operations that had been enhanced through successful completion of reconnaissance missions that pushed the boundaries of available capabilities. In the distance, mountain ridges that had concealed enemy activities were now subject to surveillance that would provide operational advantages throughout the continuing conflict. Personnel who had witnessed the departure and return of the reconnaissance aircraft understood they had observed exceptional capabilities being applied to tactical problems that had previously remained unsolved. The successful mission completion validated command decisions to utilize skills that had been developed through the most demanding operational experiences available in military aviation. As afternoon briefings summarized intelligence gathered during the morning reconnaissance mission, tactical advantages gained through successful completion of objectives in challenging terrain became evident to personnel responsible for operational planning throughout the region. Information that had been unavailable through conventional reconnaissance methods now provided insights that would influence military operations at multiple command levels. The transformation of tactical capabilities at Forward Operating Base Kestrel reflected the value of maintaining access to personnel whose skills had been developed through experiences that exceeded standard training programs. Exceptional operational requirements demanded exceptional capabilities, and successful mission completion demonstrated that such capabilities remained available when tactical situations required their application. Evening brought routine base operations that continued around aircraft and personnel, whose contributions to tactical effectiveness extended far beyond what was visible to casual observers. The helicopter that had conducted reconnaissance missions in terrain where others had failed sat ready for additional operations that would further enhance military capabilities throughout the challenging operational environment. As darkness fell over the desert landscape surrounding Forward Operating Base Kestrel, preparations began for additional reconnaissance missions that would build upon successful completion of objectives that had previously been beyond reach of available assets. The tactical situation continued to evolve in ways that reflected enhanced capabilities for gathering intelligence needed for effective operational planning in terrain that had challenged previous military operations. The success of initial reconnaissance missions established foundations for expanded operations that would ultimately provide comprehensive intelligence coverage of areas that had remained largely unknown to coalition forces. Future flights would continue testing pilot and aircraft capabilities, while gathering information needed for tactical advantages throughout the region where ongoing military operations required accurate intelligence for effective mission planning. Personnel throughout the forward base understood they were witnessing the application of exceptional capabilities to tactical problems that had limited military effectiveness in challenging terrain. While specific mission details remained classified, the successful completion of reconnaissance objectives that had previously proven impossible created renewed confidence in operational capabilities available for future missions, requiring the highest levels of professional competence. As night settled over mountainous terrain where reconnaissance missions had successfully gathered critical intelligence, forward operating Base Kestrel prepared for continued operations that would further demonstrate the tactical advantages available through utilization of exceptional pilot skills, applied to operational requirements that pushed the boundaries of standard military capabilities. The classified nature of successful reconnaissance missions meant that recognition for exceptional performance would remain limited to personnel with appropriate security clearances, an operational need to know specific details about capabilities that had been demonstrated under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Success would be measured in tactical advantages that enhanced military effectiveness rather than public acknowledgement of individual contributions to operational achievements. Reyes completed routine post-mission procedures with the same professional efficiency she brought to all assigned duties, but command personnel now understood they had access to capabilities that significantly enhanced tactical options available for operations in terrain that had previously limited reconnaissance effectiveness. The successful demonstration of exceptional flying skills under extreme conditions established her as an invaluable asset for future missions requiring similar capabilities. As forward operating Base Kestrel settled into nighttime operations, classified planning sessions began for additional reconnaissance missions that would continue gathering intelligence needed for comprehensive understanding of enemy activities in mountainous terrain that remained largely unmapped by previous coalition efforts. The success of initial missions provided confidence that expanded operations could safely accomplish objectives that had previously been considered beyond available capabilities. The desert night sky that had witnessed successful completion of reconnaissance missions in challenging terrain now covered a forward base where tactical capabilities had been enhanced through demonstration of exceptional pilot skills, applied to operational requirements that demanded the highest levels of professional competence and personal courage. The mission debrief lasted 3 hours, with intelligence officers dissecting every frame of footage and analyzing heat signatures captured during Rey's reconnaissance flight. The conference room filled with cigarette smoke and the quiet intensity of professionals who understood they were examining evidence that could reshape the entire tactical picture in their operational sector. Satellite feeds projected onto wall-mounted screens showed terrain features that had never been properly mapped, enemy positions that challenged existing intelligence estimates, and infiltration routes that explained how opposing forces had been conducting seemingly impossible logistical operations. Major Patricia Vance, the unit's senior intelligence officer, traced red markers across topographical maps while correlating Rey's visual observations with electronic signatures detected by the Apache's sophisticated sensor suite. Her normally composed demeanor showed cracks of excitement as patterns emerged that had eluded months of conventional intelligence-gathering efforts. "These supply routes shouldn't exist," Vance muttered, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses as she studied elevation charts. "According to every terrain analysis we've conducted, vehicle movement through these passes should be impossible. The grade exceeds operational parameters for any known enemy equipment." Reyes sat quietly at the conference table, occasionally answering specific questions about flight conditions or visual observations, but otherwise allowing the intelligence professionals to process information she had risked her life to gather. Her flight suit still bore sweat stains from the mission, and her hands showed the slight tremor that came from hours of precise aircraft control under extreme stress. She watched the analysts work with the detached interest of someone who had seen similar briefings before, understanding that her role ended with successful mission completion, while others determined how the intelligence would influence broader operational planning. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne paced between the maps and computer terminals, his expression reflecting the complex calculations of a commander whose tactical options had suddenly expanded in ways that created both opportunities and additional responsibilities. The intelligence gathered during Ray's flight confirmed enemy capabilities that exceeded previous estimates while revealing vulnerabilities that could be exploited through carefully planned operations. "How confident are we about these vehicle counts?" Thorne asked, pointing to a cluster of heat signatures that appeared on thermal imagery captured during the reconnaissance flight. "High confidence, sir," Vance replied. "The Apache sensors detected at least 15 vehicles in convoy formation, moving through terrain we assessed as impassable. Vehicle types consistent with heavy logistics support fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, possibly mobile communications equipment." The implications hung heavy in the air. Enemy forces were not only using previously unknown routes through mountainous terrain, but they were moving substantial quantities of supplies and equipment that suggested preparation for operations, significantly larger than intelligence estimates had predicted. The tactical picture was shifting in real time as analysts processed information that challenged fundamental assumptions about enemy capabilities and intentions. Communications specialists monitored classified networks for additional intelligence that might correlate with Ray's observations, searching for patterns that could reveal the scope and timeline of enemy operational planning. Radio intercepts from the past week were being reanalyzed in light of new information that provided context for previously incomprehensible enemy communications. The successful reconnaissance mission had accomplished its primary objective of gathering intelligence about enemy activities in mountainous terrain, but the information collected raised more questions than it answered. Enemy capabilities appeared to exceed previous estimates in ways that demanded immediate tactical adjustments and potentially strategic reassessment of the entire operational situation in the region. Thorne studied satellite imagery that showed the full extent of mountain passes where enemy movement had been detected, calculating the resources that would be required for effective interdiction operations in terrain that challenged even the most sophisticated military equipment. The successful completion of reconnaissance objectives had provided tactical advantages, but exploiting those advantages would require additional operations that pushed the boundaries of available capabilities. "We need to plan follow-up missions," Thorne announced. "This intelligence is time-sensitive. If enemy forces are preparing major operations using these routes, we need to gather additional information about their timeline and capabilities before they complete whatever they're planning." Reyes looked up from the technical manual she had been reviewing, her expression showing the careful neutrality of someone who understood that successful completion of one reconnaissance mission would inevitably lead to requests for additional flights in equally challenging conditions. The skills that had made her invaluable for the initial mission would continue to be required as tactical situations evolved in response to intelligence that had been gathered through exceptional flying under extreme operational conditions. The conference room fell silent as everyone present understood the implications of Thorne's statement. Additional reconnaissance missions would be required to gather comprehensive intelligence about enemy activities that threatened coalition operations throughout the region. The successful completion of objectives that had previously proven impossible had established capabilities that would continue to be tested under conditions that allowed minimal margin for error. Intelligence analysts continued processing information gathered during the reconnaissance flight, their work providing foundations for operational planning that would influence military activities at multiple command levels. The tactical advantages gained through exceptional pilot skills applied to challenging missions would continue to reshape the strategic situation in ways that extended far beyond immediate reconnaissance objectives. As evening approached and preliminary intelligence assessments were completed, personnel throughout Forward Operating Base Kestrel became aware that significant tactical developments were occurring, even though specific details remained classified above their security clearance levels. The successful completion of reconnaissance operations that had previously resulted in aircraft loss had enhanced military capabilities in ways that would influence ongoing operations throughout the challenging operational environment. The Apache helicopter that had conducted the successful reconnaissance mission sat in its designated parking area, undergoing routine post-flight maintenance that revealed minimal, where despite the challenging conditions encountered during mountain flying operations, ground crew personnel worked with unusual attention to detail, understanding that the aircraft would likely be required for additional missions that would continue testing mechanical systems under extreme operational conditions. Classified communications with higher headquarters transmitted preliminary intelligence reports that would influence tactical planning at regional command levels, where strategic decisions affected resource allocation and operational priorities throughout multiple areas of responsibility. The successful demonstration of exceptional reconnaissance capabilities had provided military commanders with tactical options that had previously been unavailable due to limitations in available assets and operational capabilities. As night fell over the desert landscape surrounding Forward Operating Base Kestrel, mission planning sessions began for additional reconnaissance operations that would build upon successful completion of objectives that had enhanced tactical intelligence throughout the region. Future missions would continue to require exceptional pilot skills applied to operational requirements that demanded the highest levels of professional competence and personal courage under conditions that pushed the boundaries of standard military capabilities. The transformation in how other personnel regarded RAIs became increasingly evident as word spread about successful completion of reconnaissance objectives that had previously proven beyond reach of available capabilities. While specific mission details remained classified, the tactical results spoke clearly about exceptional performance under conditions that had challenged other pilots and resulted in aircraft loss in similarly demanding operational environments. Personnel who had initially dismissed her as just another warrant officer conducting routine maintenance duties now recognized that they had been working alongside someone whose capabilities exceeded standard training and operational experience. The successful demonstration of exceptional flying skills under extreme conditions had established her reputation among those who understood the significance of accomplishing objectives that had previously been considered impossible. As routine base operations continued around classified mission planning and intelligence analysis, the helicopter pilot who had been loading ammunition just days earlier found herself at the center of tactical planning that would influence military operations throughout the challenging terrain surrounding Forward Operating Base Kestrel. Her transition from routine duties to critical operational assignments reflected the value of maintaining access to personnel whose skills had been developed through experiences that exceeded standard military training programs. The desert night sky that covered ongoing mission planning sessions also concealed mountainous terrain where enemy forces continued activities that threatened coalition operations throughout the region. Additional reconnaissance missions would be required to gather comprehensive intelligence about capabilities and intentions that could only be assessed through direct observation under conditions that demanded exceptional pilot skills and sophisticated aircraft capabilities. Classified briefing materials were prepared for transmission to higher headquarters, where strategic decisions would be influenced by intelligence gathered through successful completion of reconnaissance objectives in terrain that had previously limited military effectiveness. The tactical advantages gained through exceptional performance under extreme conditions would continue to enhance operational capabilities available for future missions, requiring similar levels of professional competence and personal dedication. The successful reconnaissance mission marked the beginning of enhanced tactical capabilities at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, where previously unavailable assets could now be applied to operational requirements that had challenged conventional military approaches. Future operations would build upon foundations established through demonstration of exceptional pilot skills under conditions that tested the limits of both human capabilities and mechanical systems. As midnight approached and classified planning sessions continued, the forward base settled into nighttime operations that reflected enhanced tactical capabilities for gathering intelligence needed for effective operational planning in challenging terrain. The successful completion of reconnaissance objectives that had previously proven impossible had provided military commanders with tactical options that significantly expanded their ability to influence the strategic situation throughout the region. Personnel throughout the base understood they were witnessing the application of exceptional capabilities to tactical problems that had limited military effectiveness in mountainous terrain that challenged conventional reconnaissance methods. While specific mission details remained classified, the successful completion of objectives under extreme conditions created renewed confidence in operational capabilities available for future missions, requiring the highest levels of professional competence. The classified nature of successful reconnaissance operations meant that recognition for exceptional performance would remain limited to personnel with appropriate security clearances, and operational need to know specific details about capabilities that had been demonstrated under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Success would be measured in tactical advantages that enhanced military effectiveness, rather than public acknowledgement of individual contributions to operational achievements that influenced strategic planning at multiple command levels. Forward Operating Base Kestrel prepared for continued operations that would further demonstrate tactical advantages available through utilization of exceptional pilot skills applied to operational requirements that push the boundaries of standard military capabilities. The success of initial reconnaissance missions provided confidence that expanded operations could safely accomplish objectives that enhanced tactical intelligence throughout challenging terrain where enemy activities threatened coalition operations. The morning sun rose over mountainous terrain where successful reconnaissance missions had gathered critical intelligence, while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded previous estimates of what could be accomplished under extreme operational conditions. As routine base operations resumed, personnel who had witnessed exceptional performance under challenging conditions understood they had observed military capabilities that significantly enhanced tactical options available for operations in terrain that had previously limited reconnaissance effectiveness. 3 days after the successful reconnaissance mission, emergency klaxons shattered the pre-dawn quiet at Forward Operating Base Kestrel. Personnel stumbled from their quarters as urgent announcements echoed across the compound, calling for immediate assembly of all flight crews and intelligence personnel. The calm efficiency of routine operations transformed instantly into the controlled urgency that characterized military responses to developing tactical situations requiring immediate action. Reyes emerged from the pilot's quarters fully dressed, her gear bag slung over one shoulder and flight helmet in hand. Years of combat experience had trained her to sleep in conditions that allowed rapid response to emergency situations, and she moved toward the operations center with the measured pace of someone who understood that panic was the enemy of effective decision-making under pressure. The operations center buzzed with intense activity as communications specialists coordinated with multiple higher headquarters, while intelligence analysts processed real-time information from various surveillance assets throughout the region. Wall-mounted displays showed tactical situation maps marked with red symbols indicating enemy activity that had triggered the emergency response protocols. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne stood at the central planning table, surrounded by senior staff officers whose expressions reflected the gravity of tactical developments that had occurred during the night hours while most base personnel slept. Satellite imagery displayed on overhead screens showed convoy movements in mountainous terrain that intelligence assessments had predicted based on information gathered during Ray's reconnaissance mission. "The intelligence from your flight 3 days ago was accurate," Thorne announced as flight crews assembled for emergency briefing. "Enemy forces have accelerated their timeline and are moving substantial equipment through those mountain passes right now. We have a narrow window to interdict their operations before they complete whatever they're planning." The briefing room filled with the quiet tension that preceded combat operations, where success would require flawless execution under conditions that allowed minimal margin for error. Personnel who had been conducting routine duties just minutes earlier now focused their attention on tactical planning that would determine whether enemy operations could be disrupted before they threatened coalition forces throughout the region. Intelligence photographs showed convoy formations moving through terrain that conventional aircraft could not effectively engage due to the challenging flying conditions and sophisticated air defense systems that enemy forces had positioned at strategic locations throughout the mountain passes. Interdiction missions would require aircraft capabilities and pilot skills that exceeded standard operational parameters for most military aviation assets. "This is not a standard strike mission," Thorne continued, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility for operations that would test available capabilities to their maximum extent. "The terrain and enemy defenses make conventional attack profiles impossible. We need precision engagement in conditions that will challenge the most experienced pilots and sophisticated aircraft." Ray studied the mission briefing materials with the focused attention of someone who recognized that her recent reconnaissance flight had been preparation for operations that would demand every skill she had developed through years of flying under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The successful completion of intelligence-gathering objectives had established her capabilities, but combat missions would test those skills under conditions where mechanical failure or pilot error would likely prove fatal. Target analysis revealed enemy convoy formations that included vehicles carrying supplies and equipment, consistent with preparation for major offensive operations against coalition positions. The intelligence gathered during reconnaissance missions had provided tactical warning, but interdiction would require strikes delivered with precision that exceeded normal operational parameters while operating in terrain that challenged aircraft maneuverability under ideal conditions. Weather forecasts showed marginal flying conditions with low cloud cover and unpredictable wind patterns that would complicate target acquisition and weapon delivery, while providing concealment that could be exploited by skilled pilots familiar with mountain flying techniques. Success would depend on exceptional pilot capabilities applied to tactical situations that demanded split-second decision-making under circumstances where conventional approaches would likely result in mission failure. Enemy air defense capabilities included mobile surface-to-air missile systems, positioned to cover likely aircraft approach routes through mountain passes, weapons platforms sophisticated enough to engage modern military aircraft at ranges that would make traditional evasion techniques ineffective. Strike missions would require flight profiles that maximize terrain masking while maintaining accuracy needed for successful target engagement. The tactical situation demanded immediate response to prevent enemy forces from completing logistical operations that could support major offensive actions against coalition positions throughout the region. Time constraints meant that normal mission planning procedures would be compressed, requiring rapid decision-making based on best available intelligence and assessment of capabilities needed for mission success under challenging operational conditions. Communications specialists coordinated with supporting elements that would provide electronic warfare support and search and rescue capabilities for strike missions that would push the boundaries of acceptable risk in terrain where aircraft recovery might prove impossible if mechanical problems or enemy action resulted in loss of aircraft and personnel in mountainous environment that challenged conventional rescue operations. The mission briefing concluded with assignment of specific targets and coordination procedures that would allow multiple aircraft to operate in confined airspace without interfering with each other, while maintaining tactical surprise that was essential for successful engagement of enemy convoys protected by sophisticated air defense systems positioned throughout mountain passes. Reyes accepted her mission assignment with the quiet professionalism that characterized pilots whose careers had been built on successful completion of operations that tested the limits of human capabilities and mechanical systems. Her target package included convoy elements moving through terrain features that would require precision flying under conditions that allowed minimal margin for navigation error or tactical miscalculation. Pre-flight preparations proceeded with intensity that reflected the critical nature of time-sensitive operations, where delay could result in loss of tactical opportunities that might not be available again if enemy forces completed their logistical movements through mountain passes that provided concealment from conventional surveillance and interdiction capabilities. Ground crew personnel worked with exceptional efficiency, preparing aircraft for combat missions that would test mechanical systems under extreme operational conditions, while maintaining the reliability needed for successful completion of objectives in terrain where emergency landing sites were non-existent and mechanical failure would likely prove catastrophic for aircraft and personnel. The Apache helicopter assigned to Reyes had been configured with maximum ordnance load and extended fuel capacity, needed for operations in mountainous terrain where target engagement would require sustained flight operations at significant distances from forward operating base Kestrel. Weapons systems checks confirmed full operational capability for precision strikes against targets that would require accurate weapon delivery under challenging flight conditions. As dawn broke over the desert landscape surrounding the forward base, final mission preparations were completed, and aircraft crews conducted last-minute briefing that reviewed tactical procedures and emergency protocols for operations in terrain that had already proven hazardous to previous flight operations. The successful completion of reconnaissance missions had demonstrated capabilities, but combat operations would test those skills under conditions where enemy forces would actively attempt to prevent mission success. Radio communications confirmed coordination with higher headquarters and supporting elements that would monitor mission progress while providing assistance if tactical situations required additional resources or emergency response capabilities. The classified nature of strike operations meant that most base personnel would remain unaware of specific mission details, but everyone understood that significant tactical operations were developing that would influence the broader strategic situation throughout the region. The helicopter engines wound up to operational speed as pre-flight checks confirmed aircraft readiness for combat missions that would require exceptional pilot skills applied to tactical challenges that pushed the boundaries of standard military aviation capabilities. Ground control cleared the aircraft for departure, and the Apache lifted into morning sky that would soon witness precision strikes delivered under conditions that tested the limits of both human competence and mechanical systems. Radio communications maintained contact with base operations as the aircraft proceeded toward mountainous terrain where enemy convoys continued movement through passes that conventional military assets could not effectively engage due to challenging flying conditions and sophisticated defensive systems, positioned to protect logistical operations critical to enemy tactical planning throughout the region. The transition from routine base operations to combat missions reflected the rapid tactical developments that characterized military operations in environments where enemy capabilities could shift suddenly in response to intelligence developments and operational opportunities. Success would depend on exceptional pilot skills and aircraft capabilities applied to precision strike missions under conditions that had previously challenged other military aviation assets. Navigation systems guided the helicopter through initial phases of flight over terrain that had become familiar during recent reconnaissance operations. But combat missions would require different tactical approaches that prioritized successful target engagement, while maintaining aircraft survivability in an environment where enemy air defense systems posed significant threats to coalition aviation operations. As mountain ridges appeared ahead, the mission entered the phase where exceptional pilot skills would determine whether precision strikes could be delivered successfully against targets, moving through terrain that challenged aircraft maneuverability, while operating under conditions where enemy defensive systems threatened any aircraft operating within range of sophisticated surface-to-air missile platforms positioned throughout the mountain passes.